my shims came in for this little Volvo Penta diesel for those fuel pumps, injector pumps. So I'm gonna see if I can get this thing together today. There's the little motor behind me right there. So I'm gonna show you what I found on it and what I'm gonna hopefully do to fix it. Well, first of all, I'm gonna show you behind this control cover plate here, what I found whenever I popped it open. This little lever right here that's connected to your stop, the stop control, which is right here, which is spring loaded, so it opens back up. And what that does is if you can see down inside there, it pushes, when you move the lever, it pushes that like that and pushes the throttle all the way to the stop position. Well, how it was when I took it apart was that little lever right there was completely upside down. Somebody had taken all this shaft apart and put it back together, and that little lever was pointing down instead of up, so it was not doing anything, not engaging that shaft there at all. So that was one of the things. All right, another thing, this little thing right here controls your maximum fuel, volume of fuel, and basically it's a stop that control rod pushes against and maxes it out and won't let it go any further. And this thing is a kind of a delicate balance. It has to, it's got a spring on both sides, and it's supposed to stay right there. And it's factory set right here for your horsepower and all that. And it's supposed to stay just like that. Well, it was back in there like that, so it wasn't doing anything. So the previous owner told me the last time it had cranked that it had, run away from them, and they had to disconnect the fuel line to shut it off and all that. So that would have probably been that problem. So when you install this cover plate right here, it's a little bit tricky to do, but you've got to get when you put this cover plate on, that little spring right there has to fit under this housing right here. You can see right there where it's supposed to rub right there where it's supposed to be, and that just kind of sandwiches that in between those two springs, and it just wants to stay right there because it's spring loaded either way. It doesn't want to move, and when you put it together, it's kind of tricky to hold that in place while you put the cover on it because you don't know whether it's in place or not. But I'll show you later how I do that. So that was the two biggest problems in here, and let's see here, what else I could show you. Okay, I've already taken my fuel lines all loose from these injectors, and I actually already popped these injectors out. And when I took them out, well, first of all, let me show you the shims that they were using. They were using these steel washers as shims, and then no other gasket. Luckily, these injector pumps are the newer style that's got an O-ring on them as well. The older ones didn't have O-rings. It just the shims themselves were the only thing that sealed out, keep the oil from coming out of the engine. So because it had the O-rings, it wasn't dumping oil everywhere. But these washers are, let's see if I can figure out what the distance is on. Okay, so these washers are like 0.05 in thickness, and they're supposed to be like 0.9 millimeters, which is like 0.035 or thereabouts, 0.0354 or something. So right off the bat, you know, they were set too deep, or excuse me, they were set too high, too shallow, which so you can see there that this washer is like 0.05. So that was the immediate problem too, or part of the problem. So my new shims, they came in an assortment of different thicknesses, and then the brown ones there, those are the sealing gaskets that go top and bottom, and then the other ones are what they call hard shims, which is basically just sheets of plastic cut at different thicknesses. So I've already sorted these out, and I've got these set up for the 0354 for the 0.9 millimeter that I need for this one, and the 0.031 I believe it is for this one, the 0.8 millimeter. So I've got I've got my shims sorted out and put in little plastic bags to keep them clean until I'm ready for them. So whenever I took these injector pumps out, what I found was like what I expected. That little fuel lever on the side of these things was not engaged at all with the control rod that runs through here. So I'm going to pull this one out here to kind of show you what. Okay, if you look right here, that little lever right there, that controls the amount of fuel that the pump pumps, and they seem to be working okay. Like there would be completely cut off, and there would be completely wide open. And you may not be able to see in here, but I think you can. There's a little bitty slot right there. Let's see if I can move it here. You see it moving back and forth there. That's what controls this little pin on that little control right there. So when you move your throttle back and forth, which is this moving, you can see in there that it moves that control rod, which is nothing more than just a flat bar with some slots cut in it. Now you can also may notice that the other one over there is moving. That's because I've dropped it back in the slot, and it's moving because I don't have it, you know, torqued down. It's just sitting here loose. What I did, I turned the crank down here with a wrench to get these those wheels, hardened wheels down there in their absolute lowest position, so that when I install these injector pumps, I'm not fighting the spring, because that's about impossible to get them in there and get them lined up when you're also fighting, you know, the tension on the spring. So you run that cam down as low as it'll go, where it's not firing, so that these are just in natural, you know, open. You know, the spring is not compressed at all, and then you can get it in and you can maneuver it around and make sure you get it locked into that little slot. Now, you know, it's easy to see this and say, yeah, that's got to go in that slot, but when you try to put it in that hole, you no longer can see it, and it's very very difficult even to feel it when it goes in that slot, because this little bar right here, it's just, you notice here, it's just kind of like floating, and there's a bolt right here and a bolt right here that go up underneath it, and it's got like a machine's surface on it that this thing right here just slides back and forth on. And then these bolts here, up here, well, there, it's a little pin that goes through a slot that controls it from moving up or down. It lets it slide back and forth this way only, but not up and down, other than just a fraction of amount. And so it literally is just kind of floating in there between all these 4 points here. And so whenever this, which is the throttle, moves it back and forth, it just basically is just floating, so it can slide back and forth real easy. And of course, it's lubricated with the oil splashing up and all that. So anyway, so I'm going to clean off this surface right here real good, where the original gaskets left a little bit of material behind. I'll get those cleaned out real good, and then I'll get my proper gaskets on it and get it in there. But like I say, you just have to really fiddle with it a little bit until you can just barely kind of feel it go in that little slot, because you can't see it. There is a plug back here that you can take off that you can look in there, but it's almost impossible, even with a flashlight, it's almost impossible to really see what's going on in there. So you don't really see what's going on, but you just have to kind of feel it. And that's the problem, is people drop these things in and they just kind of assume they just drop in and you're done, but that's not the case. They have to align with that little slot, and you just line it up as best you can, by eye, right before you drop it in the hole, and then you just ease it down until you feel it touch that rod, and then you jiggle it around until you feel that little pin drop in that slot. And what happens if sometimes people will put them in there and miss that slot and just go ahead and force them in, and this rod right there gets bent. And if that's the case, you've got to take a whole thing apart and take that rod out and straighten it back out again. And of course, there's another round rod that's connected to it right back in here somewhere, and goes back up here to the to that shutoff little lever. That shutoff, that's the rod that's connected to right there. Runs all the way back and connects to that flat bar back in here. And that's just so that the shutoff can push and cut off both pumps. Anyway, a whole lot of rambling, I know. So I'm going to take both pumps out. You don't want to get the pumps mixed up either. In this case, they're both the same, the +5 measurement, so it probably wouldn't be the end of the world if you did get them mixed up. But generally speaking, you don't want to get these pumps mixed up, because they go where they go. And if you're using your same pumps back, you want to try to put them back in the same spot and not get them mixed up. These pumps look good. I have a feeling that the previous owner had probably taken these pumps out and had them serviced or even replaced, and then tried to put them back in, and probably where all the problem came from, probably had taken them out and had them, rebuilt or replaced or whatever, repaired, and then just, put them back in and didn't realize he didn't have them in the slots. And then when they cranked it, it didn't run right. He had no control over it, couldn't shut it off or whatever. Popped this apart thinking something was wrong in here, and that's when all this got put together wrong as well. And then the next time they cranked it, it ran away from them, and they had to shut it off by turning off the fuel like I did in the last video. So I'm just kind of guessing, just kind of trying to thinking, that's kind of what probably happened, because the motor's in great shape. These pumps appear to be in good shape, and obviously they're working because I already had the motor running. The fact that they had them set too high, was affecting the timing. Anyway, so I'm gonna put this camera away and set up the GoPro and just go ahead and try to put this thing back together. Might be able to see it there now. straight down below that nut, you see the mark on the pump and then the mark on the block. They have to align. The pump itself fits tight in this hole right here. That O-ring just locks into that, and then way down in the bottom there, it fits in really tight in something else. That little roller wheel down there, it's a snug fit down in there. So the center line of the pump, if you will, that's already kind of like fixed. All you're doing is like turning it to align that, and by turning it, that gets the pin in that rod down there in the right position. And every motor, you know, may be slightly different, but they're all similar in concept. So if you kind of get one, you know, engine kind of figured out, most of them from then on are at least going to be easier to understand. Okay, so that's still in the off position. That's in the off position. Yeah, you can see scratches all on that thing where that thing was pushing back and forth on top of that pin without it being in that groove or in that slot. And that one just fell right in. So, and you can see it moving the pump back and forth. So it should be right. It felt like it just fell right in the groove. I'll then check my alignment. And that one looks like it's right on it already, so it's good right where it's at. Alignment's still good. So the next thing I do is check my service manual, and I just went online and downloaded the service manual and printed it off. It's not the best service manual I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, it's kind of poor, honestly. Well, left to my own devices, so to speak, I normally just tighten something down until it breaks and then back off a quarter turn. I'm pretty heavy-handed with things, so I do try to check on things. And according to this here book here, the fuel injection pumps are supposed to be tightened at 18.4 foot-pounds. So I already had them about to that, just from pre-tightening them. Okay, so they're in, and hopefully working. You kind of don't know 100% for sure until you crank the motor. But I'm pretty sure they went in the holes. I think they did. Put this plug back in before I forget about it. You just have to make sure you get the sealing washer top and bottom on these banjo fittings. This thing has a manual primer bleeder, and I'm pumping that until I get fuel out with no bubbles, which is good right there, and they keep pumping it while you tighten it. So now I've got it primed to the top of the filter. Now what I'm going to do here to make sure that this little spring thing here stays in the appropriate spot. We'll see if I can't feed a string through. Just a little lightweight string, like that. And then I can use that to hold it in place while I put the cover on it, and then once I get the cover on it, then I can just pull the string out. Now, you've got to hold this up against the spring like that to get it in the ballpark of the right spot. And then I'll hold that like that. And then with a little bit of luck, it's all in the right spot. Try not to let it move because everything is spring loaded. Now, before I tighten up these bottom ones, I've got to pull my thread out that's holding that spring in the right spot. So I'm going to loosen these back up a little bit. And that thread should just pull right out. Just easy peasy. All right. You know, the first time I crank it's going to be hard to crank because I got to get everything bled, get all the air out of the lines and all that things. This motor does not have glow plugs on it or anything like that. So it's, you know, when it's cold, it's going to be a harder engine to crank. But I think I've got it all back together again. So I think I'm going to try to crank it again.